So welcome to this week's episode of Leadership Soundbites with Michelle and Kristi. Kristi you've been on the podcast, I think this is like the fourth time now.
I think it
I
is.
want you back more often. And I thought about calling you earlier and didn't. So I want to get you back because I freaking love your perspective. Senior Director, Integration Operations at Sutter Health. And for those of you who don't know, Kristi and I met when we both worked at Sutter Health. I no longer work at Sutter Health. Kristi still works at Sutter Health, but in a different role than what she had before. We were catching up before I hit record, and so I'm excited to be in the room with you again. This week, the theme that came up, it was funny because when I reached out to you, Kristi, it was like, hey, do you want to get on a podcast to talk about stuff? What is the topic? This is what I'm hearing from coachees, right? And you're like, perfect, because this is what I'm hearing too. And this is what I'm hearing is centered around this, and maybe you guys can relate to it, stress, right? And I'm going to throw something out there that you may or may not agree with. And the fact that stress or the emotions or how we react to stuff is a frickin' choice. And so the quote that we have aligns with that. So we both smiled when we heard it. It isn't the load that breaks you down, it's the way you carry it. And so part of that for me is around the mindset and what you choose to do with what's happening in your outside world. I go to Sean Aker and Happiness Advantage in a video I probably watched 50 times because I use it in the room with leaders. Is that if I know everything about your external environment, again, the stuff that may be triggering stress or whatever it is, if I know everything about it, I can only predict 10% of your future happiness because 90% of that frickin' work is an inside job. And so the exciting part of that is stress, overwhelm, whatever it may be, we have choices that we can make about how to respond to stuff that doesn't end up us in this space of stress. What's on your brain? You're shaking your head.
Yeah, when I think about the quote and how you carry the load, the burden, the work, whatever you want to call it, the first thing that comes to mind is how are you using your team, the people around you? How are you reaching out? Because we often think of the load as something that we carry individually. And if we look at that load and we look, especially as a leader, if you're looking at the load and you're saying, I have this amazing group of people around me, how can I bring them in and say, let's all take a look at this load and see how we can do this together. People often don't think of it like that.
Well, and I love it. So I'm smiling and I'm like, yeah, I'm bobbleheading too. But what comes to mind for me, right, is some of this stuff because I've got the people that I'm coaching are leaders, individual contributor leaders, all the way up to, multiple service lines, CEOs and organizations. And it's interesting when you've got people that I'm going to call high potential, right, strong performers that can see the leader struggling. So what you're talking about from a leader perspective is, hey, tap into your team. How do you let people in? You've got the team members that are looking up, seeing that the leader is stressed, things are going on. And the question they often ask the leader is, how can I help you? So the coaching that I give to people, and the leader goes, no, there's nothing you can do, essentially, right? So the narrative, the story that the person hearing that can take away is either they don't trust me, right, to actually take this work on, which is the primary one, by the way, is they don't trust me, I don't know enough. When the thing that I talk to coachees about is think about what else could be going on for that person, what else could it be? And part of it could be is if you're that leader in that stress mode, right, your creative learning centers, part of your brain have shut down when you're in that space. And so if someone comes to you with that question, how can I help you? You don't know because you're not critically thinking, right? All you're knowing is the thing that you've got going is everything that you're doing is everything you have to be doing, and there's no time to do it all. That's usually the story we have going. Versus the person coming to the leader saying, I see you do this, this, and this, and I think I can help you with this in this way, which is different. So that you relieve that person who's in this space of not functioning, right? Well, of saying, let me take this.
And I'll take it one step further. So to your point too, that person's coming to you, let me relieve you of this, but often when we get to a point where we're so overwhelmed and stressed, we're not even sharing with the people around us what our work looks like. So I will often coach leaders in any capacity. Go to the people around you and say, here's the work. What
Mhm.
do you think? When you go to, when I was in a role where the person I reported to had left and I was doing an interim role, now I'm doing two roles. I went to my team and said, here's everything that needs to be accomplished. What do you all think?
Mhm.
And I immediately got them involved. I shared with them what the work was. And
Mhm.
everybody felt like, wow, she trusts us enough to share what she's being tasked with. And immediately you see everybody, brighten up, sit up. I can see what I can take. Ooh, I can do this. And it's empowering for everybody in the room.
Oh, I agree. And I love the fact that the perspective that you're coming from is being able to, as a leader, create awareness around a leader of people, I'll say, because I want to make that distinction because everyone is a leader, right? We lead ourselves first to lead other people. But if you look at leaders with people reporting to them, that's advice that you can do if someone has a coach, right, that you can advise them, or if you're that leader with people reporting to you. If you're someone who's a leader that you don't have direct reports, but you're seeing this happen with the person that you report to, but no one's coaching them, right? Here's the approach that you can take as you step in. I want to go back to the whole idea, and that started with me around stress, and it was overwhelm and stress. Because I would hear these kinds of words that typically us as humans say, right? They will say something like, I'm overwhelmed, I'm so overwhelmed, I'm so stressed, I am whatever it may be. And they start that sentence with I am. When we do that enough with enough energy and passion around it, it actually becomes our identity. All right. And people go, I can't see out of it. I can't see way out of it. Da 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 da. Because you've now claimed it as your identity. And so what happens is our brain will work overtime to make sure that our circumstances, our behaviors, everything we experience align to our identity. So one of the simplest tricks, Kristi, that I've done with clients, and I've watched it just quickly shift, is don't own that. Don't go, I am stressed. I am overwhelmed. Ask yourself, and this is what I ask clients, what's happening when you're feeling this way? One client said, well, there's a lot of change happening and, different things going on and new thing, whatever, that kind of thing. And I said, okay. And she described some of the stuff. I said, so it sounds like you've got a lot of new and different things happening. She's like, yeah. I said, so why not replace I am overwhelmed with, wow, I've got a lot of new and different things happening, because she laughed every time she said it. So that happened. 2 weeks later, I had a different person in front of me. So it's the awareness, I think. Are you saying are you saying I am fill in the blank? Or are you saying this is stressful, which is different because you're not taking on ownership of it? I don't know what your experience has been with that.
Well, and you almost, this becomes your identity. So when you
Yes.
go in saying, I am stressed, I am overwhelmed, then you continue to build that story. And everybody that
Hmm.
you're talking to, you're saying that, and you're saying, here are all of these things that are making me stressed and overwhelmed, and I can't see my way out of it. And in fact, it may be something that you could very easily, change, move, make a difference in, but you've gotten yourself to a point where you can't even look at it differently because you just keep with that narrative, and it becomes
Hmm.
so overwhelming to you because I am
Hmm.
overwhelmed
Yes.
that it can't possibly begin to even have a conversation about how you pull yourself out of it.
Hmm. So what do you do? What do you recommend to people?
Well, I think that kind of goes back first. If you're a leader of a team and you
Hmm.
have an opportunity to share that with the team, you're also then telling your team, I'm human. And you're
Yeah.
role modeling a behavior
Yeah.
that you want your team to see is okay.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that I will often coach people on is go to your leader
Mm-hmm.
and say, this is how I'm feeling.
Mm-hmm.
But come with a list of your work and why this is super important, because then it gets you to document what you're actually doing.
Mm-hmm.
Gives you time to reflect on that, but then you can take it to your leader and say, here's what I'm doing. I'm feeling overwhelmed. Help me. And the leader at that point then can say, you know what? I see you have B on your list. Let's put that on pause for a bit because I
Mm-hmm.
really want you to focus on A.
Yeah.
And maybe that's all you needed was somebody to tell you, you can pause B and focus on A.
Yeah.
And if that can be, that in itself can be life changing, but writing down what your perception of that stress and overwhelmed piece too
Mm-hmm.
helps you put some context around it.
Yeah. No, I love that idea because the other thing that it gets out is it gets it out of your brain, right? If you haven't put it down, because your brain is just swirling this stuff all the time, right? And you're not necessarily focusing on one thing to completion, right? It's a little bit here, it's a little bit, it's almost like ADD, right? You're just kind of combo of like a hummingbird and a Tasmanian devil, you're just all around, right? Your brain's going crazy. I love that. I love the other part too, is that you're able to surface the assumptions that you're making around the workload that you have, right? And one of the assumptions in that space is everything's important and it all has to be done. And if you can go to somebody else and say, hey, help me prioritize, because this is all the work. This is, to your point, what I'm experiencing. And what's the stuff that really matters right now?
Mhm.
I love that.
And
Um,
I know you've had Trina White on, so I have to do a little shout out to Trina. I reported to Trina for a bit, and we were going through a change at that point, a little bit of an org change, role responsibilities, and she came to me with something that she wanted me to take, and that's when I was in that interim role, and I said, I don't feel like I have capacity to do that right now. Here's what I'm doing. What do you think? And she said, I want you to continue focusing on what you are focusing on, and we're going to put a pause on that thing I just asked you to do.
wow.
And was that's the importance of being able to take that list to your leader and say, here's what I'm doing. I need your help. You
Mhm.
tell me what you think. And for her to be able to respond and say, you're right. You can't do this right now. We can
Mhm.
put that on hold. And when you feel like you maybe have capacity, then let's talk about it again. And that made me walk away feeling, okay, I can conquer this work.
Well, not only that, I can't imagine that you felt extremely heard
Mm-hmm.
and respected in that moment, because the other narrative could be is they don't care. We have to do it all and more, right? Because I get that from leaders too, that there's this perception that the organization, which is made up of humans, don't care if they're burning their people out. And I don't know that there may be situations, there are situations, I'm sure that that's the case. But I think a lot of times too is people aren't necessarily raising the flag at that level because they don't want to be perceived as not being capable. So they just keep taking it on, right? And so I think there's so much value and importance in doing what you just said. And if you're a leader of and you have people on your team and they're not coming to you with check-ins on what's going on, but you're observing things happening, right? Maybe people are working late at night, they're sending emails late at night. The quality of the work may slip a little bit because it's going to, when you have people spinning too many plates and people aren't coming to you, don't assume that they can handle it. Have the conversation, check in with them and say, hey, how are things going? I noticed that, you've got a lot going on, you're working really late. What is it going to take so that you're not having to do that? But that will give people permission to step up, because a lot of times people don't want to be perceived as air quote failing. And they label that themselves as failing if they can't do everything that their leader assigned them to do.
And you might, I love that. And the idea of, when you're seeing somebody on your team and even a colleague maybe that's sending messages at, 2 o'clock in the morning, and you sit down and you have that conversation with them. Um, Sometimes you might find out, because I always go to with being stressed and overwhelmed, this idea of work-life balance. Maybe that person has decided the way I balance my life. I always say it's not work-life balance, it's life balance. Work
I
is
like
part of
that.
our life. It's life
Yeah,
balance.
I
And what
like
this
that.
person has decided to do is, for me, it helps me when I put the kids to bed. I spend my time. I might check out an hour early from the email, so I can spend time with my family, and then I jump on when the kids go to bed, and that's how I balance my life.
Yeah,
I get to spend time with my family, but then I feel accomplished by being able to maybe jump on email a little bit later. And you learn something about somebody, and that's how they balance, and it works for them. But the
yeah.
person that constantly does it, and it's not about the balance, it's more about feeling overwhelmed, then to your point, you're going to be able to help that person work through that.
Yeah. The other thing too, I wonder, and I'm curious about your opinion on this, right? Because when you triggered the working later in the evening or 2 o'clock in the morning, whatever it is, I have a definite opinion, right? About that and the message that it sends to the team.
Mhm.
So my opinion is that I'm going to coach leaders, don't send those emails. Don't emails on the weekends. If you do the work, to your point, if that's what you want to do, hold off and schedule them to go out later during air quote normal working hours. But I'm curious, what's your opinion in the scenario that you just described?
Oh, I agree with you. I do think that's kind of the next part of that is, if absolutely you should pause that, because what is the message that you're sending? Maybe it's to people who report to you, or sometimes a colleague might even think, "Oosh, should I be working on the weekends?
Mhm.
Will the person we report to think less of me because I'm not sending emails on a
Yeah,
Saturday or Sunday?" So if you choose to balance your life in that manner, kudos, because you're finding life balance, but make sure that you aren't inadvertently making somebody else feel like that they have to be doing something that they actually don't have to be doing.
yeah, yeah. So I was just curious, yeah, because when I coach leaders, it's like walk the talk around that whole piece. If you're
Mm-hmm.
telling your team, I love life balance. And like I said, I wrote it down. If you're telling your team, have life balance, you're messaging them that when you go on vacation, I don't want you working.
Mm-hmm.
And yet you're doing all those things that you're telling them that you don't expect them to do. You're actually telling them you expect them to do it based on your actions. And so that's my whole thinking around that. But I love the life balance and the curiosity to understand why people may be doing what they're doing, which
Mm-hmm.
I think is powerful. But still on the other end of it, be very cognizant about what is the rest of the world viewing, or what message are you giving people that you're not aware of.
Well,
Yeah.
and even outside of that, when you talk about life balance, so maybe it's not about sending emails, but I think people think of work life in the traditional sense of, I have to immediately, be on at 8 and I have to be working until 5, which is fine. But then all of a sudden you're on now at 7:30, and you're on at 7, and then you're on to 5:36, and that time stretches out.
Mm-hmm.
um, I always try to tell people, so find out if that's how your life is starting to shift, then maybe is it in the middle? I got on early this morning, but I say I have this gap in the middle of my day. I'm actually going to go get my nails done. I'm going to go watch my child's play at school, and try to find the balance in other ways. I'm going to go read a book. I'm going to sit outside, whatever it is that you can take away from. You don't have to be on
Mm-hmm.
that entire time. So find the pockets, and that's where
Mm-hmm.
you find the balance.
Yeah, the thing that I would add, because I'm sitting here going, yep, yep, yep. Took a nap. Take a
Take it
freaking 30-minute nap and recharge your brain. The
Yep.
thing that uses the most resources in our entire body. Recharge your brain. Yeah.
Mhm.
And I do that sometimes. The other morning, my first meeting was at 6 a.m. And by the time 11:30, 12 came, like hit a wall. Okay, so I need to recharge right now. And then I can go back at it because I'm like, I got nothing left. an empty tank at that point.
It's true. I mean, I even had a colleague say they started it was 6 or 6:30, but they realized they had a gap a little bit later. So they went to the golf course and hit a bucket of balls and then came back and started in. And it was like, okay, now I'm recharged. I'm good to
Yeah.
go. You're feeling, you have a little exercise in you and you're feeling good.
Yeah. I
Find
love
those
it.
moments.
Well, and I think the theme that I'm hearing is flexibility, right?
Yeah.
It's not the rigor that we've presupposed that it has to be, but find that just because you started early doesn't mean you still continue on through the same thing. Or to your point, there can be a break in the day, but look for those moments. Yeah,
Mhm.
I like it.
Yeah.
So thank you. And we're gonna do this more often. I'm just saying it. I'm just claiming it as what it is. What's one thing or two things that you want people to walk away with around this whole topic around stress and choice and managing, and especially in today's world?
I think when we go back to looking at your list and what you have on that list, and when we think of it as saying no to something, don't think of it as saying no. Think of it as saying, I can do this. So if you need to tell somebody, no, you're not saying no. If it helps you not feel overwhelmed and stressed, because saying no in and of itself can be overwhelming
Mhm.
and stressful, go to that person and say, I love what you're showing me. I absolutely can do that. I don't have capacity right now.
Mhm.
Unless you feel something else that I'm doing right now can be put on hold. You're effectively removing the word no. I can't do
Mhm.
that. You're saying I can do it. I absolutely have the skill set to do that. I just need to fit it in somewhere else. And I think that will help somebody who can just be stressed and overwhelmed at the idea of saying no,
Mhm.
reframe it.
I love that. It reminds me of a conversation I had with someone, and it was around a similar thing. Instead of going to when extra work keeps coming, going to the one up leader, going, we don't have enough resources to do this, right? Which is this negative wall barrier thing that you put up. Or we need more resources, is what it was. So it was this call for demand. And I told her, I said, the whole words and the messaging and stuff that you're just calling out matters. So it's like, here's everything on our plate now. And to your point, there's the ability to do it. The bandwidth isn't there, right? So what do you do to create bandwidth? What are we stopping? What are we pausing on? All that stuff. Who are we, the people that need to be doing all this stuff? And maybe it needs to be done, but I'm not the one that has to do it. But it does open you up to all these different options that weren't necessarily options before, especially if you go and say, we need more resources to be able to do this. It's like, wait a minute, are there resources somewhere else? Can you do it? Does somebody else have bandwidth?
Yep.
So
And
I love that.
leave with reflection, because I always weave that in somewhere. If you're reflecting back on your day, you're reflecting back even on the meeting that you're in. We're often in meetings that we don't actually need to be in. Maybe somebody
Yes.
could download it. Do a quick reflection on the day, a quick reflection on the meeting. That will help you also start to map out where you have areas of opportunity to relieve that feeling of being overwhelmed and stressed.
Yeah. Yeah. You remind me, I'm just going to say this one last thing and then I'll say goodbye, I promise. So this one last thing is we did this mapping event. It was around meetings because I don't think people have optics awareness of how consuming they are or how many people on the same team are attending the same meeting, right? And to your point, the purpose of it, if you're attending a meeting and it's strictly to get the information, you don't need to be at the meeting to get the information. You can get the information some other way. We literally did mapping on the wall, and it was a whole wall of a conference room where we had the leaders' names around one side, and then the different buckets of stuff, meetings, and then firefighting time and everything else. And so they could visually see of this one meeting how many people in the team, the same people were attending, which is awesome activity to go through. But when we're done, of course, me and my natural style, I pulled this from a wall thing onto Excel spreadsheets. And each leader with firefighting and meeting time and everything else, they were running around 2.2 FTE, each leader. And it's like, so here's the path to burnout. Let's go. But they had optics to it to where they could start going, okay, no. So who's the right one in this meeting? So to your point, get awareness to it, whether it's reflection that way individually, or if you're in a leadership role, high enough and up and or have your team, do that activity and find out, do you have redundant resources in there that who's the person that needs to be there or should be there that can hand off information to the rest of the group? Yeah. There's just so many tips and tricks because we
So
do
many.
it because everybody wants to be involved in everything. And it's like, no, you can't. No, no.
No. And it's life changing when you can say, I don't need to be in that meeting.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is, yeah, it's so nice.
It is
Just
so nice.
send me the notes.
Yep.
Thank you again. This is Leadership Sound Bites with Michelle and Kristi. Please like, share, subscribe. I guess there's a little bell notification if you want to get notifications when new episodes drop. And if you want to be a guest and have a perspective on leadership, which I'm sure you do, let me know. So until next time, thank you.